Shall we start now?
Sorry?
So, welcome back to the afternoon session. The first session in the afternoon is by Dr. Shaijumon, Imam. Now we have Muhammad Ziyad PA with us for chairing this session. I welcome Muhammad Ziyad for the same. Thank you.
We are moving on to the next session of EFCS conference series. Participants kindly ensure that they have muted their mics. The next speaker is Dr. M. Shaijumon, Assistant Professor from the Department of Physics, IISER Thiruvananthapuram. Dr. Shaijumon has completed his PhD from IIT Madras in 2005. After that, he did 2 postdocs, one from Rice University with the renowned nanotechnologist Pulikala Jain, and another at University of Paul Sabatier. He conducts research in the areas of multifunctional hybrid nanostructure and energy storage conversion devices. He has, to his credit, 5 patents and more than 60 international publications. He is also the recipient of many awards, including DAE Young Scientist Research Award. He is the member of several editorial boards and referee for international journals. With these few words, I welcome Dr. M. Shaijumon to deliver his talk on batteries beyond lithium ions. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my slide. I hope it's clear now. I mean, you will see that?
We can see it, but it is not full screen.
Yeah, I'll do it. Okay, great. Yeah. So thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure, to share some of our recent activities in the area of batteries. Farook College is certainly. I mean, I've been. This is the first time I think giving a talk. I've been closely following all the recent the last year's the conferences. And well, I mean, I remember applying to Farook College as well, and I got an admission long back for MSc, but then later on I moved to Lithium-ion College Institute for my MSc. So with that, let me thank the organizers and of course Pradeep as well, for the invitation. So I would try to talk a little bit on batteries. This is something that
Shaijumon, your voice is not coming very, very well. So maybe that has to come a little bit closer, or some fan or something.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Some sort of rattling kind of noise.
Okay. I'll just give me a second.
If you can speak a few words,
Yeah, so is this better now or?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you. So let me move on. So this is on batteries, lithium-ion batteries. Well, I mean, beyond lithium-ion that we talk about, and let's see what we have. And there's just a couple of snaps of our institute to those who have not been to our institute, IISER Thiruvananthapuram. It's a beautiful campus. Please do visit us otherwise. Okay, so this is something that we often get to see. our mobile phones or our laptops, and and this is something that which this is something even the kids, the moment they try out all sort of things in their mobile phones, and finally when they get to see this screenshot, they just typically leave their mobile phones away, right? And think about it, and the situation is even worse if you get to see this kind of image, right? What is this that we are seeing here, right? This is a speedometer for an electric vehicle, and think about you're in the middle of nowhere, right? And driving on your electric vehicle, and you get to see this kind of alarm signal, right? Which says like, I'm running out of charge, you somehow do something, right? So these are some of the challenges that, typically comes to your mind, especially something which we are related with, right? And there are a number of other things that we can come about with, when you talk about energy. And as I think energy is certainly, in one of the greatest challenges that we face apart from water and other things. So now this is something that with this background and the need for alternative energy sources, let's try to look at a specific case about rechargeable batteries. So what I'm trying to talk today is mostly looking, of course, this is again from the broad audience here. So I would try to make it a little bit more on the overall coverage of this area, trying to tell you what are the state of the art and also the projected technologies here. So I would try to tell you something about the importance that why we need to go for an alternative battery chemistry or technology for that matter, and also try to highlight this the importance of materials here. I mean, I think this is very clear. I'm sure you've been listening to several talks on materials the last 2 days, and any technology that you think about it, right? Doesn't matter energy technology, is it like IT technology, electronics technology, anything. I think materials are the key to all sort of advancements, and that's precisely that you get to see here in energy as well, right? All these challenges, all these issues that we talk about it, unless we think about a materials revolution, nothing short of a materials revolution, it's sort of very difficult to meet these kind of energy demands, right? And at the very end, I'll try to share some of the recent efforts in our group as well from the literature, again pointing towards some of the new directions, right? And I'm sure, I think this is very clear. People have been talking about everyone knows about the depletion of fossil fuels, environmental pollution associated with it, and the growing interest in looking for alternative energy, right? But then one key point I think that one should look at here is like, it's not just any type of alternative energy that we are looking at, but it has to be clean, it has to be cheap and efficient as well, right? And that's exactly what we get to see in terms of the recent developments in the material science and engineering, right? Trying to engineer materials, trying to come up with new concepts, new directions in material science and engineering, toward addressing these kind of very important challenges in energy, right? So certainly it's very clear that we need to harvest and store electrical energy by means of the efficient devices, the most efficient devices possible out there, right? So whenever we think about the energy devices, right, the couple of devices that quickly come to your mind is, of course, starting with the battery. I would very specifically talk about a rechargeable lithium-ion battery to start with. And the other thing is about supercapacitor, right? I'm sure you'd have, by now you'd have heard about both these devices in some talks or earlier. But then just to give you a quick comparison of the two, right? So when it comes to battery, of course, that, though both are electrochemical storage devices, when it comes to battery, it is more of a redox reactions happening within the electrodes, right? And it is more like a diffusion control process that we get to see here, right? And as a matter of fact, the storage is more, determined by the volume or mass of the electrodes, right? And you get to see larger number of large energy storage, and the energy density is pretty high there. Power density is a bit low. Whereas when you come to supercapacitor, the charge is mostly stored at the the surface of these electrodes, right? And there is no redox reactions as such happening in this in a pure electrochemical capacitor, right? And hence there are exactly very different properties that you get to see in terms of when you compare with the battery. For instance, the power density is very high. I'm sure you can relate to some of the even the capacitor devices that we have all dealt with in our earlier laboratories or something. These are pretty good in power, but the energy density is very, very low, right? So what I want to tell you, there's always this trade-off between when you were to compare the energy as well as the power of these any devices for that matter, any energy devices that for that matter, right? This is a very typical plot which is called a Ragon plot, which compares both energy, specific energy as well as the specific power, which are the very two important properties, important parameters of of any of these energy storage devices. So it's very clear, right? What we are looking at, when we try to work on these kind of materials for energy storage devices, these kind of energy storage devices, it's very clear that I want to, design energy storage devices that could be sort of placed at the diagonal direction of this plot, isn't it? Because then there is no trade-off, there is no issue with both with energy as well as power, both remain the same, right? So that is one important thing when you just want to take note of that, because that's exactly what we wanted to do, right? The batteries that we do, right, should be good in both energy as well as the power density. You will appreciate this particular point when we start talking about, when we start thinking about large scale battery applications, not just any of these portable devices where you really do not sometimes find much changes, much issues. But then when you think about large scale battery applications, something like let's say storage grids or even electric vehicle applications, right? This is very, very important. You need to have both power as well as the energy very high, right? Now, so let's try to spend a couple of minutes to trying to understand, right? When we say that energy as well as the power, these are the important parameters. Let's try to understand where does it come from, right? Because unless we know that, we do not have much room to play around with it, right? So it's very clear. Looking at a high performance battery, high energy, high power is important, and high energy, of course, you can go back and relate to the very simple equation, right? Relation where capacity and voltage are involved, right? So when you are looking at the chemistry point of view, right, all these three are important: the solid chemistry, electrochemistry, the thermodynamics, right? And the power, on the other hand, comes mostly from the design aspect of the device. Why? Because there is an element of engineering, there's an element of physics into it, because you're dealing with voltage and current, right? So you have to get rid of all these ohmic drops there. And how do I do that? Of course, some of the materials are intrinsically not that conducting, so you'll have to sort of engineer the materials, or you'll have to sort of bring in some kind of what you call architectures, the nano architecture, or any kind of things into this device, so that you minimize this ohmic drop here, right? So these are the combinations that one could use when you start thinking about modifying, when you start thinking about improving the performance of your batteries or supercapacitors, right? So why are we all interested in lithium-ion batteries, right? It's very clear from this graph. I think it's sort of self-explanatory, because just a comparison of gravimetric as well as the volumetric energy densities will clearly tell you, compared to all the other battery forms that we know of, like lead-acid batteries, nickel cadmium, nickel metal hydride, right? Lithium-ion sort of dominates this field with its huge energy density, mostly coming from its, thanks to its electrochemistry, electrochemical potential, and also the lightweight nature of this lithium, right? All leads to this high energy density, right? And of course, it's been a growing field, since the 1980s, and that's precisely, you could see here, finally, we would say from the battery community, we think so. Finally, these people have been awarded with the Nobel in 2019 for the development of lithium-ion batteries. So one very interesting point to note here, I think this is important. This is interesting, rather. You think about all these three gentlemen, right? John Goodenough, right? I don't know how many of you know about. He was a theoretical physicist, right? And turned into solid-state chemist, and then finally, of course, his contribution, things like that. Of course, Stanley Whittingham is a chemist, and Akira Yoshino is actually an engineer from by training, right? So this is the kind of collaboration. This is the kind of teamwork that one needs when especially in this area of energy storage devices, right? A chemist alone cannot do things, right? So you have to have people coming from various disciplines and collaborating with each other with their own expertise, trying to improve the performance, because there are so many parameters that are involved. You have to play around with it, and the moment you start improving the energy density, you get to see that there's an issue with the power, right? All these trade-off, everything it's there, and everything has to go in balance. And unless we have a team, with expertise on all these fields, it's very hard to sort of move further, right? So that's when you get to see it's very similar to what we talk about nanotechnology, where you have people all coming under the same umbrella. I think you also get to see in these kind of applications, these kind of areas where lots of people come from various backgrounds are putting their efforts, are coming together, in the whole development of this area, right? So let's have a very quick look at what goes in a battery. I'm sure these are known to many people, but then to the students who are not familiar with it, let's have a quick tour. So typically, an electrochemical device would have an anode and cathode. Here, in a typical lithium-ion battery, you have what you call it the graphite as the anode material, and then there could be some oxides like lithium cobalt oxide, which are the cathode materials. And of course, there is a separator which is electrically insulating in nature. And again, this is sort of a mechanism, because you can see that when you discharge or when you charge a battery, when you take a typical battery, when you charge it, what happens is, of course, the lithium ions from this cathode would move towards this anode, right? And on the reverse, basically, when you discharge it, the stored lithium in the anode, right? Of course, oxidation happens here, and lithium ion move through this, the material through this electrolyte, and then gets reduced here at the cathode. So there is otherwise there is sort of a shuttling of this lithium ions between these two electrodes, and that is exactly the mechanism of the current modern lithium-ion batteries, right? And of course, these are the established or these are the materials that are even currently using in the modern lithium-ion batteries. That is another very interesting and important thing to note here, because these are the materials. These are the materials which have been developed by the so-called Nobel laureates, both at the graphitic anode as well as the lithium cobalt oxide by John Goodenough, right? So, which means like we haven't really been. As a whole, if you look at it, the energy technology has not been really growing that rapidly, right? The advancement has not been that great over this last 30 years or so, 30 to 40 years, right? Unlike the other technologies like electronics technologies, for instance, where you can really think of fantastic things happening over the past several years, right? I'll come back to it a little later. Trying to compare these kind of the slow-paced the growth in the case of energy technology a little later to it, right? Okay, so now the importance of materials comes here, because again, you have conductive additives, because you have to make sure that these particles which are there in your anodes are well connected electronically, as well as it has to be bound together. So we add some sort of conductive additives, we add binders to stick together all these things, right? So the simple reaction goes like that, as I mentioned earlier here, right? Both oxidation reduction happens at the respective electrodes. But then there are, having said that, there are lots of issues, right? When it comes to the real working of a graphite lithium cobalt oxide cell, which is the typical batteries that we all have in most of our mobile phones and laptops, right? Because this is a typical charging discharging curve of a lithium-ion battery, and you can see that this pink color curve, which is typically a discharge curve at the anode, which is the graphite, right? And very flat curve. And again, one thing to remember is the actual voltage of the battery is nothing but the difference between the two voltages, like the cathode as well as the anode voltage, right? So very simple. If you go back to my earlier relation, I mean, now you can easily say that, okay, that's not a big deal now, because all that you wanted to do is like increase this voltage, increase the separation, right? So what I can do is I can think of getting a material whose intercalation voltage is less than that of graphite, and I can think of these graphite, the cathode material whose active or the intercalation potential is higher than this one, right? So that we can increase the voltage window. But then there are a lot of issues coming in, even with the current technology. If you look at it, there is something which is marked here in yellow at the graphite that says, if you further go down the voltage, or rather what happens is this particular voltage of graphite itself is very close to the lithium plating voltage. What do I mean by plating? Because that's where you still go down the voltage. Instead of lithium intercalating, it will start plating. The lithium ions start plating onto the electrode, right? And then what happens is there could be a dendritic formation of this lithium onto this electrode. And these needle-like dendrites will pierce through the electrolyte and sort of short the entire device. That's a safety concern, right? So on the other hand, cobalt oxide, if I further go beyond, what happens is there is all sort of electrolyte decomposition there, and there could be a gas evolution, that can easily, bring about some, fire and things like that. And that's something that you often get to see, the fire issues and things like that in these kind of batteries. So what I'm trying to say is, like, even the current technology, even the current battery, devices are not free from safety aspects, right? Though otherwise, again, it has issues with the energy as well as power as well, but then importantly the safety issues, right? So we certainly need to move around. We certainly need to look for alternative chemistries, alternative materials. Even within the chemistry itself, you can think about lots of materials around. For example, anode itself, various kinds of carbon you can play around with it, alloys, intermetallics. And cathode materials also, there are lots of different cathode materials out there where you can play around with it, right? So that is another and as usual with the electrolyte as well, right? So another important, so these are the important parameters like the safety, cost, battery life. These are all very important. I'm not going into detail about it. So when we actually design a battery, all these parameters need to be well taken care, right? And when you really say that, okay, this particular battery is good, this particular battery is efficient, all sort of things are to be looked at, right? So I also mentioned about this, materials. I think there's absolutely no issue in terms of materials. All that it's all out there. I mean, the very rich and versatile chemistry is out there. Range of electrode materials that one could think of, right? All that you need to do is like, something like, walk into the kitchen and then trying to, play around, or rather trying to, take all these different powders. Exactly, that's what you want to do, right? Pick the right material from the stop group, which is the cathode. Pick the right material from the anode. And that has to go in a very optimized manner. That's exactly what is required here. There's absolutely no issue with the materials. Another important thing is, like, I'm sure you've probably been exposed to the various, or rather you might be knowing about the various domains of applications, right? Mostly we're all familiar with two important domains. One is, of course, the portable electronics. If you ask somebody, they say, okay, yes, I know I need battery because I need to power my portable devices like, cell phones or laptops. And in these days, of course, you might also get to hear even from the, students or things like that, saying that, okay, I need battery because, I'm probably going to run my automobile when I get a job, and when I buy an automobile, it will all be electrically driven, and I think we need to build batteries, for the vehicular applications as well. But the fact is, it is not just these two domains that we are interested. I mean, there are extreme cases. For example, when you look up, large-scale applications like backup power grids, like large-scale devices, large-scale storage needs are there. And extreme, on the other hand, you have these kind of micro-scale devices, right? And that's important thing. That's exactly what I mentioned earlier, right? The electronics industry has sort of outpaced in terms of the development that you get to see here compared to the energy technology. And these days, you can think about very, very tiny devices, very, very tiny electronic devices. You can easily really go and talk about micro scale devices, or even nanoscale devices, nano circuits for the matter. But then unless these devices or the circuits are self-powered, right, it is going to be a disaster, I would say, because, think about it, you have very, very tiny micro scale devices, but then, to charge it, to power it, you have to connect with a big battery unit to it. And that is the limitation. That is the main constraint, with regard to these electronic devices. It is not that they cannot further go down in size, but the issue is like, these battery peoples are not with them, right? So which means like there is, as of now, as of today, right, we do not have an onboard power source for these kind of electronic devices, right? And many times, for example, this pacemaker, right, almost like 3/4 of the pacemaker is eaten or taken up by the volume of the size of the battery. So can we actually bring down the size of the battery? Unless these kind of so-called, these biomedical drug delivery devices, unless these are self-powered, right? Well, let's not even worry about it. Let's not even think about these kind of devices, right? And, you might even ask me like, why do you worry? Because you can think about a thin film battery for that. Unfortunately, these thin film batteries cannot meet the required, the power density or the energy density. Again, let me not get into the calculation part of it. So what is the way out, right? So another way to think about is like, a three-dimensional architecture. Can you actually ascribe a three-dimensional architecture to the battery technology, right? This is very similar to what we talk about. For example, you think about it, you have like 2 or 3 cents of land on a highway, right? And you have a family of like, let's say 7 or 8 people, and everybody needs a room, right? What do I do, right? It is the footprint area is very limited. The only way is like go vertical, right? That's exactly what the electronic device people say. Look, man, I mean, I will just give you a very, very tiny area, footprint area. I don't know what you do. You build your device there, right? And for the battery community, for the battery scientists, there's no other way to go vertical, right? So that's the latest. That's another an important direction that people are trying to do when we think about these kind of tiny devices, micro scale or nano scale, the electronic devices. Right. So, for example, for instance, you can think about, and this is very important when you start thinking about the next generation nanoscale energy storage devices. You're going to talk about powering these kind of nanoscale circuits, right? And at that time, you really wanted to have a power on chip devices. Wherever the power is required on the chip, I place my power source there, right? And a couple of options is like, can we actually think about making a completely the full battery onto a nanowire? It's not like making battery using nanowires, but then I'm saying, let's say, think about it. I have a 100 to 200 nanometer diameter in a nanowire, and this particular 200 nanometer nanowire, I can say that, let's say this is a battery, which means like I should be able to build in the anode, cathode, as well as this, the electrolyte components onto this, let's say 200 to 500 nanometer diameter wire. And that would be fantastic. Think about it, right? So, but then extremely challenging as well, right? And we've been looking at these kind of devices for quite some time now, thinking about making these kind of bisegmented, tri-segmented, architectures. And then is it possible to do that? Is it possible to make these kind of nano architectures, right? Extremely challenging, but then, this is something which is going on in our group as well. So all that I want to tell you is, depending upon the energy domains, right, your material design is also going to be different, right? I think I'll have to go a little faster. And now with all our interest on electric mobility, even in India, we have a great program, huge program on e-mobility. And ultimately, I think by 2030, that is what we all envisage, because it has to completely be moved into the e-mobility program, and that's where the challenge is even more, because well, I mean, it's not just when you talk about e-vehicles, it is not just trying to have efficient batteries, but then all other infrastructure like the charging stations, everything needs to be taken care. And but certainly, I think battery. Coming up with large-scale efficient batteries is certainly a big problem, challenge in front of all of us, right? So that's a roadmap I was telling about in terms of the e-mobility program. And of course, I think it is certainly going to help us in terms of reducing the pollution factor, in terms of reducing the emissions, apart from the energy, addressing this energy challenge. So certainly, I think it would be a great initiative if we all could meet it. But then again, underlining the fact that batteries are really important, right? I also mentioned about the safety issues. Let me not go into the details. So that's another reason that we should be looking for an alternative chemistry in this regard. So when you talk about batteries, when you talk about building better batteries, right? When I say better batteries, I do mean that I do cover all these aspects that I talked about, having high energy, having high power, a completely safe device, right? All these are taken care. I think there are 2-3 directions that one could take about it. One is certainly, with the existing lithium-ion battery technology, can we actually bring about innovations in this? And this is what I mentioned in the very, very first slide, right? I mean, nothing short of materials revolution can bring these kind of innovative changes here, because you're not talking about very incremental change in my capacity, very incremental change in my energy or power density. Absolutely no, right? You have to bring in a completely new technology. You have to bring in completely new directions to it, even within the same battery chemistry of lithium-ion. Otherwise, move on to new battery technologies. That's what I've been trying to tell today, right? Alternative to lithium-ion battery, are there any other chemistries like sodium, potassium, right? Or alternative to lithium, like lithium sulfur, metal sulfur batteries, or metal air batteries, right? So another way of looking at it is like, can you actually think about having a hybrid technology? If you remember my first slide, we talked about batteries, we talked about capacitors. Can you actually make a hybrid of the two, right? Essentially what we are looking at is like having improved energy as well as the power densities, right? So nobody says that I need batteries. I should be using batteries alone. Nobody says that I should not be using capacitors. So why not we combine the two technologies and come up with a battery hybrid technology, right? As long as our needs are satisfied, I mean, we don't find any problem with that. So I think these are the key, ways out. These are the key directions out there. And when you actually move towards alternative chemistries, the important thing that comes is about the abundance. I mean, again, lithium. Why are we moving about? Of course, the safety and other issues are there. Apart from that, I think the scarcity of lithium is being talked about in a big way, because it is mostly geographically constrained. I think now China is sort of trying to, engulf all these, resources of lithium, and down the line, maybe 10 years, 20 years down the line, I think we are going to have tough time getting lithium. So that's one reason, of course, we have to move out of lithium. And apart from the other issues that I talked about it, and if that is the case, of course, we go after the abundance, right? Next to lithium, of course, the next person would be sodium there, right? With its huge natural abundance and more or less the similar properties, electrochemical properties compared to lithium, right? I think that, the community has sort of realized that sodium would be the next, the closest towards replacing the lithium chemistry. And also, apart from sodium or potassium, right, there are other, batteries like the solid state batteries. I mean, it could be based on lithium, but then, right, metal sulfur batteries I talked about, even lithium sulfur batteries, right? Apart from the resource availability, but then that's an entirely different, directions that we take about, right? Metal air batteries I talked about, but then there are lots of issues. Even with sulfur, we get to see, the why we are going for metal air batteries or sulfur batteries is because that the energy density is very, very high compared to the normal today's lithium-ion batteries. But then again, to make it in a commercial point of view, when you think in a commercial point of view, it is a long way to go, I would say, in terms of these other chemistries. But then the closest would be to replace lithium with the sodium-ion batteries, and there's a lot of I think we are getting more and closer towards practical realization of this chemistry. And again, coming back to the different kinds of materials out there, there are lots of materials very similar to battery, very similar to lithium also, that you got to see earlier, carbon-based materials, alloy-based materials, metal oxide, several, even organic materials, I would say, right? So a lot of things have happened at the laboratory scale now, and even our group at HISER, we've been looking at several of these materials for sodium-ion batteries, apart from lithium, right? Trying to play around with the materials mostly, And mostly we've been looking at anode as well as the cathode electrode materials, and again trying to play around with these materials. And what you get to see here on the left hand side is an organic based material used for a battery. I would just spend a couple of minutes talking about this, because I think there is a huge chemistry background, chemistry students out there, I'm sure. And the scope for these kind of organic electrode materials, and it's sort of a revisit, when you talk about organic materials and energy storage, because of its design flexibility. I think that's a very key point. Of course, it goes with any technology, but then specifically for this energy technology, the materials which you think are easily tunable, which you think having these kind of design flexibility, right? I think that stands out. Especially you can see this difference here, right? Because you're trying to play around, you're trying to tune the various parameters. So it is very important. Some of the inorganic materials, if you take it, might be very interesting for its energy, but then the moment I wanted to slightly tune its potential, slightly tune its rate capability, you get to see problems there. So instead, these kind of organic materials turns out to be very, very interesting in terms of these kind of two factors that I talked about. The design flexibility factor, right? And these kind of carbonyl based systems have been going very good, but of course it has its own issues. We've been working closely with one of my colleagues in chemistry, Professor Mahesh Hariharan, where he works on these kind of perylene polyimides, and we've explored these materials for sodium-ion batteries in the recent time, right? A completely polyimide, where it means like both anode, cathode, we make use of these kind of organic materials. These are very interesting directions into it. Again, I'm not going into details of it, but then I just wanted to show one example where I talked about this design aspect of these organic materials. For example, let's say I wanted to tune the potential, right? See, most of these batteries, if you look at it, it comes with this kind of multiple plateaus. That is not that's not a favorable thing, because when you wanted to use a battery, in fact, it has to be the potential has to be flat, because I need to get a flat voltage, right? This kind of step voltage wouldn't work there. Unfortunately, all these organic materials are showing these kind of multiple plateaus for its own reason, which I'm not going into detail now. So now the point is like, getting this, trying to take the advantage of these kind of organic material. Is it possible to tune the shape of the voltage profile, right? Is it possible to tune the voltage potential itself, right? That's one thing we demonstrated in one of our recent efforts. Again, because these, you're trying to modify this perylene diamides, right, polyimides with attaching these kind of interesting moieties like bromide, tribromo species, right? We could actually nicely tune the voltage profile, both the voltage as well as the shape of the curve. You can very well see here from this left hand side to right hand side, you can see that it could actually flatten the curve, and we could actually increase the potential of this battery, right? So this is one example that I wanted to bring out, right? The design flexibility aspect when it comes to these kind of these kind of materials. I'll quickly move on. I believe I have another 5 minutes or so. So very quickly, but then having said all these things, right? You go for a sodium-ion battery, you go for these kind of organic material, but then still, I think we certainly lack in terms of the power and the energy putting together, which is very, very important when you actually apply to large-scale applications like the vehicular applications. So you still are looking for a super duper sort of device which could be placed at the very, very diagonal side, as you get to see here, right? So what is another option, right? Apart from going for an alternative chemistry, can we think about these kind of hybrid technology? That's what I mentioned earlier, right? So can I combine the technologies that you have in a power-based devices like capacitors as well as a battery? Can we put together, right? So I mean, this is a relatively new concept, I would say. And again, it has not been into commercial side yet. It's still at the R&D level, but I think it really comes with a lot of scope here, right? Really trying to build a hybrid technology here, right? So all that we are trying to do is like, one of these devices, in this device, one of these electrode would be, the mechanism will be like a battery storage. On the other one, the mechanism is more like a capacitor storage. So you try to build you try to build the hybrid device, then you get best properties of both these materials. Very similar to any sort of hybrid material that you think of, right? So this is another direction that we have been working on. for quite some time now in terms of trying out materials, trying to tune these materials, and apart from all these things, we also build these kind of devices in our lab. Like these pouch cell devices, and we try to show some sort of proof of concept in terms of the demonstration aspect. And it is even more interesting that these kind of devices could actually be made flexible in nature, thanks to the graphene, reduced graphene oxide that we try to add along with it, which makes the electrode more flexible in nature, and then we could nicely use it for these kind of flexible applications as well, right? Or this is another device that we made, completely moldable devices, right? You crush it, crumple it, and then throw it there and pick it up. It works. Okay, so again, the point I wanted to bring here is like these are all possible because you have to play around with the material that goes inside, right? And these are very important. These are very important factors when you really wanted to when you really want to consider these for these kind of applications as well, right? And another way is like again this hybrid technology itself, right? Can we actually think about miniaturizing the size, as I mentioned earlier, right? This hybrid, that would be interesting, even this kind of interdigitated fashion or something like that. For instance, you could actually pattern this using some lithography or something onto a very small footprint area and try growing different types of nanowire. That's we have shown here, right? In one of our recent projects on DST, on these two different, the pads, we could actually grow different types of electrodes which are more active towards this hybrid ion concept, and that would bring about very, very interesting things in terms of the hybrid, miniaturized hybrid devices. Very quickly, one more thing. The other very recent effort, very recent direction in battery technology is something called dual ion batteries. I just wanted to mention this to you. Again, it is probably like a couple of years old and a lot of challenges at this point, but it's an interesting concept. Why? Because so far we've been talking about or thinking about only the cationic intercalation, cationic transfer. When I say shuttling between the two electrodes, either lithium-ion or sodium-ion or potassium-ion, just the cation shuttles. Can we not make use of both the ions present in the electrolyte, both the cations as well as the anode? When cation is intercalating into the anode, can these anions be intercalated into the cathode material as well? Right? Why? Because typically these anion intercalation happens at a much higher voltage. So then, if that happens, if you can think about some electrodes which can do this job, right? In terms of the anionic intercalation as well. So you make use of both the ions present in the electrolyte, and that's what we call dual ion concept. Right? Graphite is being typically used at the cathode now. So again, it's at a very, very preliminary stage, I think, but I personally see a lot of interest and promise or potential in these kind of devices, and something which is coming up. So I think I'm just done. Almost. So just one important thing to talk about is, again, we talk about various devices, but then right now we are in 2020, and then you really see that as I mentioned earlier, we need to have a revolutionary change now to step onwards, because the kind of challenges that we are faced with is like long range electric vehicles, all sort of things are coming up. So that's a huge jump that we are thinking about, and nothing less than the materials revolution can play around with it. And of course, in India, with a very strong background in chemistry and material science, and I think we can do a wonderful job here. I would just stop here. We're closing with one slide here, just to tell you something about what we do in ICER apart from the batteries. Looking mostly at the materials, what 2D materials we do, functional materials, mostly apart from the batteries or energy storage that we looked at it. We also work on these kind of electrocatalysis, trying mostly based on these two-dimensional layered materials there. Again, what we're trying to look at is like trying to engineer these materials. I'm just showing this because, if anybody is interested in this area also can, interact with us, talk to us. And we've been working on these kind of systems as well in the recent past. So I think I would stop here, and then again we try to make these kind of miniaturized cavities that does all sort of electrocatalysis and things like that. I think I would just stop here. Sorry if I took more time, and would be happy to take questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Your words have charged all of us. The session is now open for discussion. Participants can ask few questions.
Well, I will just start by asking one question that you said in organic materials, the kind of constant potential is an important issue, and that is not there. And the mechanism of intercalation and de-intercalation seem to be an interesting, something that has not been fully understood. I was wondering with these recent advancements that are happening in microscopy, especially cryo-EM, and people are using this kind of things in understanding lithium batteries. Is it not possible to see where lithium goes in organic materials and why these stepwise release mechanisms happen?
Yeah, I'm not very sure. Of course, I think there has been a lot of studies on trying to do this kind of in situ, studies in these kind of materials. But then coming to the organic material, I think there's some understanding why we get these kind of multiple plateaus. Because, for example, in these kind of peridimides, there are two different sites where lithium goes in, and it goes stepwise way. So that is very clear because the inolite formation goes in that way. I think that part is very clear. But of course, I think it might be possible. I'm not very sure about it, sir, but I think it might be certainly possible.
Now these days, you can really see covalent organic framework or metal organic framework, the real molecular structure.
That would be exciting, sir. That would be exciting to look at it. Absolutely, yeah. I to my knowledge, I think people have not been looking at it, but then I think really exciting to look at it.
Thank you.
Sir, I have a small question.
Sure.
You have been talking about the replacement of lithium by sodium or potassium.
Okay.
And the other part of that one, that is the cobalt part. Cobalt is one of the costliest metal nowadays. Is there any research that's going on in replacing the cobalt part into some other things like?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that you brought in. Absolutely, absolutely. One of the other reasons is certainly the high cost of these materials, the battery devices. Cobalt is a killer here. There has been a lot of work. I did not mention this one. Completely cobalt free. I think that is the key now when you talk about cathode. Cobalt-free cathodes is certainly it is there. They've replaced completely cobalt with nickel and manganese-based materials. Yes, it is there, and there's a very active research going on, in terms of tuning the materials. For example, like even this LiFePO4, the olivine-based LiFePO4, right? That is being used by several battery manufacturers as the cathode materials, and so that's very established. But even the other things also, absolutely, yeah, it is there.
Maybe Satish has a point to say.
Yeah, I think, okay. Hello, I think, okay. So
yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, so very good talk. I think one question I had it is, see, there's always a challenge when you use aqueous electrolyte, you have very high conductivity, but you are limited with potential. And if you go for a non-aqueous electrolyte, you have a always low conductivity issue. So do we have any, way forward to address some of these issues in a battery research?
Yeah, so I think that is another. I mean, one of the things that people are trying to do is like using these kind of additives is going on. In terms of improving the conductivity and talking about aqueous. I think things are slowly coming back to aqueous as well, and trying to sort of widen the potential window again by using sort of additives and things like that. That part is also going on, but end of the day, I think for the commercial point of view, still we are way far in terms of really making use of the aqueous electrolytes. The conductivity issues are being looked at it, mostly using these kind of additive incorporation and things like that. Yeah, I think certainly that's a great point too.
Yeah, thank you.
No more questions. You'll be moving to the next session.
Sure.
Your talk was extremely enlightening, sir, and was also very valuable from the current energy scenario. And we are extremely thankful for you for showing us a glimpse of what's happening in the battery world. Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Yeah.